So you've been using N8N and you think it's a really cool and awesome tool and you want to know how to leverage it to enhance your own Wix workflows and automations. Welcome back to the Wix Wiz. I'm Eitan. Today we're going to be talking about integrating N8N with your Wix website through Wix Automations. We are going to be building automations that converse back and forth with N8N so that you can trigger N8N from within Wix, and you can also continue Wix automations from within N8N. If you want to learn how to do all that and more, let's get started. The first N8N Wix integration that I want to present is integrations that are user-facing. So essentially extending a workflow that is related to either an action that a user took on your website or some kind of result of an action that a user is supposed to receive or experience. For example, if the user is supposed to receive some kind of automated email after a certain process, or for example, after the user places an order on your website, that sets off some chain of actions that results from that user's action. I'm going to be showing how to do this all through Wix Automations in order to preserve the no-code nature of N8N, but technically everything that I'm showing you could also be done using backend code in Wix. Before we get started, let's just do a very brief intro to N8N. I don't really want to do a comprehensive tutorial here because there are really tons of resources out there specifically about N8N, and I want to focus on that connection between N8N and Wix. What is N8N? N8N is an automations workflow editor. So it allows you to create different workflows that will be triggered by something. So you could just click here in the middle and add in a trigger. So you have any one of these triggers. You can trigger something manually. Something happens in a certain app that you can integrate with. Wix is not one of these yet, but I'm going to show you how you can get around that. You could also trigger on a schedule or lots of different things. So for example, let me add a schedule trigger over here, and this is going to trigger once a day. Okay, and then what I can do is I can add different nodes, which will either process certain data that's related to the schedule trigger, or will just invoke some kind of end result. So for example, sending an email or entering something into some sheet or downloading a file, or really there are many things here. And one of the things that made N8N extremely popular is one, its ability to integrate with a lot of different AI solutions. So you can use AI very easily throughout the process to process your data and manipulate it and enhance it. And the other thing is that it's essentially an open source project. So you can go ahead and you can deploy this locally for free. You can deploy it on a free hosting service for free, or you can either deploy it through N8N or through something. My deploy is specifically through Hostinger. I found a very good deal and a very easy process to just launch N8N through them. And really for just a few bucks a month, essentially, you can have this framework for really very robust integrations. Whereas if you were paying for another service like Zapier, you'd probably end up paying a lot more for your needs. For our user-based integrations with Wix, there are essentially two sides of a coin that we need to demonstrate. One is when something that happens in Wix triggers the N8N flow, and the other example is where when something happens in N8N, that will trigger an automation inside of Wix. So let's start with when something happens inside of Wix, we are going to trigger a workflow inside of N8N. So what I'm going to do is inside of the automations panel in the dashboard, so that's here under automations, I'm going to go ahead and create a new automation. You can choose from these pre-made automations, or you can go ahead and start from scratch. And here we are prompted to select a trigger. And this trigger could be whatever you want, because our focus now is the next stage where we trigger something within N8N. So for example, here I can choose, let's choose a chat message was received. Okay, over here inside of our Wix chatbot inbox. I've gone ahead and I've installed inside my website this Wix chat. This isn't the Wix AI chat. This is the old Wix chat, so standard to allow you to chat with your customers. But really, what I'm showing you now can be done with any of the triggers provided in Wix. And I also have another tutorial showing how you can even make custom triggers using Velo code, so it could pretty much be anything that happens within your Wix website. Next, this is where the magic is going to happen, is we're going to add a step, which is an action. And this action essentially is going to need to trigger our workflow inside of N8N. So before I set up this action, let's just go over here for a second to N8N, and let's find the correct trigger that will allow us to start a workflow from outside of N8N. Again, because there's no Wix node yet. So I'm going to go over here and I'm going to add a first step. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to add this on webhook call. Okay, this essentially will allow us to trigger N8N using a webhook. So essentially by making a call to a specific URL. Okay, so here we have a test URL and we also have a production URL for when you actually launch your automation. So what I'm going to do here is I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to grab this test URL. And this is what we're going to use in order to send information from our Wix automations to N8N. Now back here inside of Wix, I'm going to go down and I'm going to look here in the integrations for send HTTP request. And the method I'm going to choose here, so again, it could be any method you want. It could be get or post or whatnot. Just make sure that the method matches the method that you choose here inside of N8N. And it's most likely that you're going to want to choose a post method because that's the method that's used if you're sending information over and you're expecting to change something or invoke some kind of chain reaction. It makes much more sense to use a post. And that's what we're going to use here. So make sure that this matches up. Again, you could choose whichever one you want that most fits what's going to happen inside of your workflow. So if this is just meant to get information, then technically you'd use a get. But again, these are just all different kinds of protocols. So if it's something that you're using internally, it doesn't matter really all that much. So we're going to use post over here and post over here. And then here we're going to need to paste that webhook URL that we copied from N8N. Okay, right over here. And now we want to choose what the payload might look like. So this payload will depend on the data that you're getting from the previous stages of your workflow. We could see an example of that payload information over here. So if you go ahead and you preview structure, so just click over here, you can see here the structure of the payload that's coming into this action. And this structure is the message that we received in Wix chat. If you had more nodes here within Wix that gain other information, I think you'd probably see that over here as well. And here we have a summary of the chat message. And most importantly, we also have some information about the contact here, which includes the contact email, which would help us do something like send an email to the contact or something like that. You'll notice that we also have here a set response data structure. This is for the data that we're expecting to get back from the HTTP request. So this really only matters if you want to add another step over here. And that's completely possible. It's very possible that you'll want to add N8N as a link inside of an automation that you have and not necessarily as the end of the automation. So if you're planning on doing that, then you would need to also set the response data structure based on what you're expecting to get back from N8N. Since all we want to do now is just demonstrate this trigger firing off, I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to click apply. And I'm going to click over here to activate this automation. Don't forget to do that. And now what I'm going to do is I'm going to go over here and I'm going to do two things. So I'm going to go to N8N and I'm going to click here to listen for test events. Okay, so now my my webhook, my trigger here is activated and it's actively listening. And I'm going to go to the live site, my Wix website, and I'm going to send a message here in the chat, okay, right over here on the bottom. So let's go ahead and write a message. I'll write here, hello, how are you? There we go. And this should technically be enough in order to trigger the sending of the webhook. So let's go ahead over here to N8N, and we can see here that we got an output, okay? And if we go down, so we can find here, we have body and we have data. And here we have all the information that we got from the Wix webhook. So we have here visitor ID. We have here the summary of the text that I sent in the chat. So hello, how are you? What we don't have, for example, is a contact ID because I visited this website as an anonymous contact. So what we'd want to do is we'd want to set up this right over here, which asks a user for their details. So if a user is, for example, logged into your website or they fill out this form, then we'll have whatever details we need in order to, for example, send them an email or something like that. One thing to note here within N8N is the respond setting here. So it's currently set to respond immediately. So if it's set to respond immediately, then what's going to happen is it'll respond. I'm not sure exactly what it will base the response on, to be honest, but it won't be based on the rest of what happens inside of N8N. And so it probably won't respond with anything of value that we'd be able to continue our automation with. So if you're planning on continuing the automation based on the response from this webhook, then you're going to want to change this respond to be, for example, let's say when last node finishes. Okay, so then this will essentially respond with the data of the last node. So that's how you would use a trigger for N8N, both as essentially a link inside of a Wix automation. Now that we understand that, let's talk for a second about how we can use N8N as the trigger and trigger an automation workflow that we have set up inside of Wix Automations. I've created a new workflow here within N8N, and now we're going to be exploring what happens when our automation starts in N8N. So to get started, I'm just going to add a trigger manually trigger here so I can trigger our workflow as I wish for the purpose of this demonstration. And here we're going to need to add a node which is going to continue and send the information from our workflow into Wix. So in order to do that, we're essentially doing the reverse of what we did when we sent the information from Wix to N8N. So the webhook is going to be set up within Wix, and the HTTP request is going to be set up within N8N. So let's head back over here to Wix Automations, where I also have a new automation set up. And this time we're going to do it, we're going to use as our trigger inside of Wix, we're going to use webhook received. So I'm going to go over here and click webhook received. And here, essentially, it's really just a mirror of what we did before in N8N. So I'm going to take this webhook URL, which is by default a post. So here within Wix, we don't have a lot of wiggle room with that. And I'm going to go ahead and copy it. And then I'm going to go over here to N8N, and I'm going to go and add an HTTP request here inside of N8N. Okay. And we're going to match it up here as well. So the method is going to be a post method, and the URL is going to be this URL that we copied over from Wix. And we're going to need to send a body if we want. I mean, we could technically just trigger the automation without any information, but it's highly likely that you'll be sending over a body of sorts. So let's just send over test, and the value will be hello world. Okay, just like that. And I'm going to, and now we're essentially ready to test this out. Okay, we're back inside of our Wix automations. Before we add a next step or action to our automation, what we need to do is we need to set up our payload data structure. And that's the data that we expect to get from N8N. And that's that test hello world that I put in there in the parameters, or whatever your workflow is going to be sending over. So I'm going to go ahead and set up that payload structure here. And essentially, it's just a JSON object of whatever the body would be. So in our case here, it's just going to be test. That's the property. And hello world, it doesn't actually matter what the value is here. It just matters that it's going to be of a type string here. That's what I'm expecting. I could also write, goodbye world here, and it would be the same thing. So I'm going to go ahead here and preview the structure. And you can see here, so test, you can see it's text that it's expecting over here, a string. And example hello world is just an example. And don't forget over here to save the structure once you're done. So that's data structure is now set over here, and we're ready to add in an action. So the action I'm going to add in is adding a card to a pipeline. Pipeline is kind of like a project management tool that's built into Wix. And here we have the option to add a pipeline card. I'm doing it just because it's very visual and you can see what's going on. But you could choose any one of these actions that you want, even create custom actions. So I'm going to go ahead over here and create a new card. And then here within the action card, we need to fill out all of these fields. So first I need to select a pipeline. So this is just an example pipeline that I created for this demo. Obviously, I have a typo here. It's N8N and not 8N8, but I don't know, for some reason that always confuses me. And once you pick a pipeline, then you can pick a stage in here. So I'm just going to pick new lead. It's not really very important. And here we get to pick our card name. So here you'll notice that for card name, description, and card value, we have the option to customize and essentially select data that we get back from previous stages of the automation. And this is because we set up that data payload. So I'm just going to go ahead and select test over here. And those are all the required fields. So that's all I'm going to do here. So I'm just going to go ahead and click apply. And yeah, I have this little warning, probably because I didn't fill out all the fields. But this should be enough to activate it. So I'm going to go ahead and activate right over here. And now let's try testing out this new automation by triggering it within N8N. So I'm going to go back to N8N over here. And I'm just going to click over here, which should execute our workflow. So I'm going to click here, execute. And the HTTP request was sent. Okay, so let's go over here to our sales pipeline. And I'm just going to go ahead and refresh this page, just probably because it didn't load the new data that came in. Let's take a look over here. And we can see here that a new card was created inside of our pipeline, which says hello world, essentially the data that we sent over from N8N. So those are the two sides of the coin, how to get information from your automations in Wix to N8N, and how to get information from your N8N workflows into Wix Automations. Now for our graduation project from the first section of this tutorial, we are going to be expanding on the first automation integration that we set up. So we've already set up that whenever a message is received in Wix chat, we're going to send the HTTP request to N8N. So that we already have in place via the webhook. What we're going to do now is we are going to trigger a workflow here, which takes the message and runs it through AI in order to create some kind of response. What we'll do is we'll try and do something funny. So we'll create some kind of joke, and then we'll send that information back via the webhook as an HTTP response. And inside our Wix automations, we are going to send an email to the person who initiated the chat with the joke. Okay, so that's the full flow that we're going to create now. So we already have this set up with sending the HTTP request, and this will have all the information received from Wix chat. And now here inside of N8N, we are going to have to do a few things. So one thing is we're going to want to process the message that they sent using AI. So I'm going to go over here, and we have a lot of different AI integrations that we can add in. So for example, I'll use here OpenAI, and then we can choose a specific kind of action. I'm going to choose the message a model action, which is the equivalent of sending, a chat message inside of ChatGPT. And here what we can do is we can choose a model once we go ahead and set up our credentials. So I'm going to go ahead and do that in a moment. It will involve getting an API key from OpenAI. I'm not going to go through those, also to keep my API key private, but also because it's a little outside the scope of this tutorial. I'm very confident that you can find resources to do that if necessary. And then we're going to shape the prompt that's going to create a certain message for our users, which we're then going to send back to Wix. I've gone ahead and set up my credentials. It was really easy, just the API key, copy, paste. And now I have the option here to choose a model from the list. Let's just go ahead and we'll choose GPT-4o, just because a lot of people like that model. It's kind of the most friendly and creative, and I think that's appropriate for jokes. And then here we are going to need to create a prompt. And we can do either fixed or expression. Expression will allow us to choose something from one of the previous nodes in N8N. So in order to do that, we're going to need to execute the previous nodes. But since this is a webhook, then we're going to have to go back over here, and we're going to need to listen from our test webhook. So let's go ahead. Okay, so it's waiting for me to call the test URL, actually. Okay, so that's good. So that means here within our website, we just need to send another message here to the chat. So let me just send another message here. So I'm going to send hello. Okay, just like that. And let's take a look over here and see if that worked. Let's see over here inside of message a model. I'm going to open that up. And we're waiting here still. There we go. So it took a moment, but the webhook came in. So now we have all the data from the webhook. And here within message a model, we should be able to, so we have all the information here. And what we can do now is that inside of our prompt, we can use one of these input fields. So for example, we can go ahead and we can get the summary. Okay, so this is the message summary. And let's give it a prompt here. So what I'll do is I'll say, write a Wix related joke about this message to send to the user. Okay, not the best prompt engineering in the world, but hopefully it will do the trick. And then over here, we can also choose to execute this step in order to see what's going to come out the other end. So essentially, here, this is the joke. Why did the web designer greet their Wix template with hello? Because they couldn't cite their... Okay, not too bad, not too shabby. So this content here, this is important to us because this is the schema. Okay, this is the schema that we're going to use in order to know what data we're getting back on the Wix side. Okay, so what we could do here is we could actually go here to JSON and then copy this JSON over here, just using this kind of copy button, head back into our automations. Okay, I'm going to open up this automation again, not view summary, sorry, but edit. And what we're going to do here is inside this send HTTP request, I've noticed the automations sometimes have a little trouble loading. So don't get too afraid if that happens. Just give it a nice little refresh there. And here within the send HTTP request, what we can do is I can set the response data structure over here. And I can go ahead over here and edit the JSON. And I'm just going to paste this over here because this is the response that we're expecting to get back. And let's see here, preview structure. So here, this is what I was talking about earlier, is that Wix has some problems here with receiving certain data structures. So since this is an array nested with some other data here, we're going to need to edit this data a little bit so that we don't send back an array, but rather we send back just this object. To try and circumvent this issue, what I've done is I've added a node into N8N called Edit Fields to essentially extract just the content part of our response and send that back like this. What I'm hoping is that the fact that N8N structures this as an array is just a technicality of N8N, and when they send the data actually from the webhook, it will be sent as an object. So that's kind of a hope that I have. And here inside of the automation, I've pasted just the object that we're expecting to get back, which is just this content object. So let's go ahead and preview the structure. And this structure is something that Wix can accept. So we can go ahead and we can save that structure. And now we're ready to add the last part of the puzzle over here. So add in step, action, and we're going to send an email. And here we're going to send the email to, here to the person that triggered this automation. And what we can do here is we can go in over here to edit the triggered email. I just need to add sender details. So I'm going to go ahead and do that. And I'll meet you here for the email customization. My sender is set up and I'm ready here to customize. So I'm going to go over here and click edit. And now what I'm going to do is I'm just going to change here a few things. So let's say I'll say a joke for you. And what we'll do here, I'll just get rid of this. And here what I'll do is I'll put the joke. Okay, so let's go ahead and get rid of this. And here we have the option in the email to add dynamic data. So what we could do here is add dynamic content, so personalized content. And we can select a value. So if we go down all the way, then here we can see on the bottom the content sent from our HTTP request. Okay, so essentially this will put the joke here into our email. So I'm going to go ahead and save and continue. And this now is all set up, if Wix would not be so buggy. And we are ready to send the automation. So I'm just going to go ahead and publish the changes. One important thing that we might want to set up to enhance this automation later on is to, maybe do some filtering and only send the email when we actually have a contact ID. But I'm pretty sure Wix will figure that out because they won't be able to send the email to just a plain visitor. So remember, this will only work if you actually provide your contact info over here or if you're logged into the site. Another thing you might want to verify here is just inside of N8N. You might want to make sure that everything is set up. So again, this is what the edit field node looks like. I don't think I showed it to you before. So this is the edit field node, and you just want to make sure that your webhook inside of the webhook is not responding immediately like I have it set up here, but it will set up when the last node finishes, and it should respond with the first entry JSON here. Okay, so that should be that first item in the JSON. So I'm going to go ahead over here, and remember here I'm still in my test webhook, my test environment. If I switch to production URL, then I'll need to switch the URL in my HTTP request inside of my Wix automation, which you'll probably do once you launch your automation. For now, what I'm going to do is I'm just going to go ahead and I'm going to listen here for test events. And then I'm going to go to my Wix website and we're going to run a test and see if it actually sends me a joke. Okay, so I sent my Wix chat this message. I sent a few messages, but this final message I sent here, do you sell apples? Again, this is after I filled out the contact info intake form. And here you can see inside of my email, you can see here that I got the joke. So why did the Wix website refuse to sell apples? Because it knew the user was trying to bite off more than it could chew. So if you want to also get a Wix related joke, I'll leave the link to this site in the description, and you're welcome to head over and go and try it out. Just to give you like a little more insight. So if you want to check that everything is kind of working smoothly, if you don't have an indicator, then you can go and see the logs for executions in N8N. And you can also see inside of the Wix automation something similar. You can see like how many times the automation was triggered, and just to make sure that things are kind of going smoothly. One thing I noticed is that when I was testing this webhook in the test mode, it didn't execute the rest of the workflow inside of N8N. So I had to shift it to production, and then it started working smoothly. So if you're having trouble in test mode, that might be part of the issue. But otherwise, this is just like a very, very simple example of how you can create and integrate workflows with Wix and N8N. With that, we're going to wrap up for today. I hope you enjoyed this tutorial. If you did, don't forget to give it a thumbs up. If you have any questions or suggestions, you can leave them in the comments below. And if you want to see my face next week as well, you can always hit that subscribe button, and I'll see you next time.